Hello everybody, Marcus Godwin here with the Shum Vremeni Noise of Time blog once again. So I have a few updates from yesterday, some fairly serious ones, because what is happening in Belarus is a colour revolution, now proven for 100% from information I gleaned after recording last night's broadcast and today. So what do we know, what can we say? The opposition candidate who was telling the EU not to recognise the Belarusian elections, hence not to recognise the Belarusian people or the Belarusian government in reality, because as I say, it might have been cheated, there may have been cheating here and there, but that kind of massive majority is not the opposite way round. So, Mrs. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, if I remember her name correctly this time, the first thing I did when I opened up my computer and saw popping out of Facebook was a photograph of her cuddling with Bernard-Henri Lévy. Bernard-Henri Lévy, c'est un ordure de l'histoire, c'est un ordure de l'humanité. He's really one of the most evil supporters of every aspect of Western imperialism you can imagine. He was there cheering on the destruction of Yugoslavia, the destruction of Iraq. He was there cheering on the destruction of Libya. He was there, of course, cheering on the destruction of Ukraine and the Maidan Putsch there, making speeches on the stage, denouncing Russia and the Russian government and Putin as dictators and all this kind of stuff, you know. He's really one of the bad guys, really one of the top globalists. This so-called, if you don't know him, he's a kind of pseudo philosopher who's very famous in France, where I lived for most of the 90s and where my children grew up. So France is not a country I'm alien to in any way, shape or form. Neither is the French language. Yeah, he's really Mr. Pseudo. He's quite a big star, unfortunately, and has quite a lot of influence there as well. If he's involved, then that's it. However, even more information came to light today. A website was discovered, which they have taken down, but luckily it still exists. I will maybe try and pin it when I put this on YouTube. I'll try and pin it there, which shows absolutely clearly that the goal of what's happening in Belarus is to cut Belarus's ties with Russia. As I say, that's like cutting Somerset's ties with England or cutting the Auvergne's ties with France or something like this. So, yeah, they want to move to total trade agreements with the EU and other Western countries and nothing with Russia. And, of course, they want to join the EU and NATO. They want Russian television stations banned in Belarus and so on. So that is what this is all about. We can ask ourselves quite seriously, actually, how can it be that the Russian government, again, didn't see this coming? Which kind of ties into what I was saying yesterday, really, that sometimes we have the feeling that the Russian government just cannot accept the evil that is in the Western world, that the rulers of the Western world are not going to stop, unless their populations stop them. And unfortunately, in France, because of the Yellow Vest process, actually leapfrogged from being the most backward political country in Europe of like 10, 20 years ago when I was living there, to the most, I don't want to use the word progressive because there's no such thing as progressive politics. Actually, that's another massive misnomer. With every day something is lost and something is gained. The needs of humanity are fundamentally no different to what they were 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, and so it goes on. 6,000 years ago, you know, this cabal has been doing this to us, everything like the control of the money supply, the constant fermenting of wars and fake conflicts, etc., for 6,000 years or more. So yeah, the idea of progressive, but however, if we think in terms of something that desperately needs doing, I suppose we can say that, you know, at that moment it becomes progress. Even progress is a slightly difficult word. I mean, I've taught a lot of people music, drums and percussion. I've taught a lot of people English, and it's great when they are making progress, when they're getting better. But they are still actually losing something at the same time. We cannot escape this fact. Even concretely, I can talk about one friend I know who studied Japanese. And she said, when I finally went to Japan and was this time able to understand what they were talking about, the country lost all its mystique for me, because the average conversations were so mundane. It was like living in the West, exactly, and Japan lost its mystery. Anyway, I'm digressing a little bit here. The main point of this is that for those of us who've understood the nature of Western imperialism and so on, this is a very, very dangerous situation in Belarus. It's much harder for them to pull off there than in Ukraine, because 50% or more of the Belarusian population is not yet anti-Russian. Very few people are, actually. There are some virulently anti-Russian, yeah, there are some, and of course they're actively involved in these movements. But the majority are not, and as I was saying yesterday, the political structures and so on, and the army and the police force are almost certainly not. How it's going to play out, I wouldn't like to say. Impossible really to say, but I hope Russia will act more. Well, it doesn't face quite the same problems. There's actually nothing to stop Russia acting far more forcibly than it did in Ukraine, because they haven't really got anything to lose by doing that. They've got a massive amount to lose if a putsch, an illegal transfer of power, which is what this would be, does actually take part in Belarus, and Belarus does start joining NATO and allowing closing down the Russian bases there and putting American ones instead. That is going to be very, very bad news for the 1,000-year-old Russian civilization indeed. So I think probably that's enough for today. This is a relatively short one, and I'm probably going to talk about some other aspects of life in Russia in the next few days. So depending on what happens, of course, how this keeps up. So if you like this and want to hear more, please consider contributing, and I look forward to communicating with you again. You can leave any comments, as long as they're basically constructive, even if you disagree. I don't mind. I'm absolutely open to hearing what you have to say. Speak to you soon. Marcus Godwin signing off from a relatively sultry evening in St. Petersburg, Russia. Bye-bye. До свидания.